Paddock is a training and exercise space for sport education and performance. Each week, we look to grow ideas and innovation through conversation from beautiful Auckland, New Zealand. Welcome to this week's On the Paddock with Graeme Sequeira. Graeme Sequeira, another great senior lecturer at the School of Sport of MIT. Long-standing career, though he actually is much younger than what he looks. He's been around in the industry for, he tells us, about 20 years. He's been in the sport industry from being an instructor in gym environments to running his own clinic as a clinical exercise physiologist, and been a senior lecturer, if I'm not mistaken, now for about 9 years, Graeme?
7.
7 years, 7 years as a senior lecturer. Graeme has a master in health science. He's basically our research guru at the School of Sport. I can say that he's one of my right-hand man when it comes to actually having those really intelligent conversations and questioning and putting some key questions to our investigative work and the research work that we do within the School of Sport. So it's a real privilege to have you on the paddock. Graeme, welcome on board. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks. I blame the lockdown beard for the aging look. It's got a bit wild.
Hey, Graeme, talk to us a little bit about yourself. And I kind of went through your journey very, very quickly, but tell us about a little bit about your background, how you ended up being so involved in the sport industry, in sports research and sports academics and lecturing. How did all this come about and made it part of your life what it is today?
Well, I started in the fitness industry, so got my first start as a fitness instructor, just in a small community gym, and then sort of got some experience and developed and grew into the sort of like personal training roles, and then eventually into owning my own clinic. So that was in the field of clinical exercise physiology. So that was really cool, a really fantastic experience, and throughout that period I was always learning. I can't actually remember a time when I never stopped studying, never stopped learning, never stopped sort of reading research and articles. So I think that if I look back, it's always been a period of development. There's never really been a time where I've stopped learning, and it was through that journey that I sort of got closer and closer to the education side of things. I think particularly as I got into the clinical exercise phys space, because that's cutting edge. So you're always reading research. I got involved with research, so I got sort of into a couple of projects.
You were talking about your journey of learning, especially when you were in that clinical exercise physiology space running your clinic, and that's when you started that strong journey about learning, and you haven't really stopped about that. You're talking a little bit about that when we cut off.
Yeah. So the clinical space is relies on and requires evidence. We base our practice on that evidence. So that connected myself really strongly to the research, and from a research and practice perspective, utilizing utilizing evidence in that applied exercise space and understanding. So that was really sort of what really connected me to the sort of research and teaching space. And so the next kind of steps with that was getting involved with research myself, through things like my master's and then into projects. And then with that, I got involved in a little bit of teaching, and I found that I really enjoyed teaching. It's really cool to be able to work with students to sort of like go through, develop their ideas, their thinking, their understanding. So yeah, really enjoyed working in that space, and that sort of is what led me to where I am now, which is sort of full-time lecturing and researching.
It's interesting what you're saying about how engaging teaching and lecturing is. I was having a conversation earlier before this recording this podcast around how we don't work in do or die space. We're not firefighters. We don't work in an ER. We actually work with human potential. We have that opportunity of actually seeing growth and development of individuals through the work that we do on a daily basis, then on a monthly basis, and on a term, then on a semester. And then when you see the whole year, or you see their whole journey of 3 years, and people are getting a degree, and you're seeing, wow, this is how human potential looks from the beginning to when it starts becoming action. And then with the follow-up that we have of students, etc., and seeing where they're at in their own professional space, it is quite exciting. And we've talked about this many times about students, and we also feel very proud of what journey they've been able to take. Before we go a little bit and talk about that and that applied nature of learning and research, Graeme, for our listeners, can you explain what the heck is clinical exercise physiology? For the common layman that actually goes and watches a game at the park, enjoys their daughter's netball, goes to the physio. You're talking about clinical exercise physiology. What are we talking about?
That's good question. It's relatively new in New Zealand. It hasn't, as an industry, it hasn't really been around for too long. Essentially, what it is a professional that works with people that have different conditions, so things like heart disease, cancer, some of those complex conditions, complex diseases, where exercise is of really of significant importance and can provide some really good benefits, not only just from the physical perspective, but also from the sort of mental health, general interaction with daily activities, improving quality of life, all that kind of stuff. So a clinical exercise physiologist has that sort of advanced level of training where so in like some of the clinical exercise physiology postgrads, so it's typically you learn about it in it's a postgrad course. You'll go through, learn about all the different conditions, different medications, and how all of that sort of works and responds in terms of exercise, physical activity, so a clinical exercise physiologist has that in-depth knowledge, and so if you've got someone with a particular need or condition, we can utilize exercise to really ultimately help with their quality of life and the sort of things that are important for daily living, and a lot of the stuff is things that we take for granted that can be affected, and exercise is really useful in terms of improving that, and that's where the research is really important. So a lot of the research that's done in that clinical exercise physiology space is to go and understand, what's the most effective form of exercise, what's a safe form of exercise, because exercise isn't a sort of a one size fits all. Individualization is really key, and so being able to to understand an individual and then tailor that exercise based on what evidence says works and what is appropriate and going to be a safe type of intervention to do is really important. So really cool profession, it was really great to work in that space to see how we could help people, because a lot of the reason why we get into this field is to help our community, to help people. And I mean, we see that reflected in a lot of our students, when we chat to them and ask them, what inspires them, what drives them to come and study and to learn. A lot of it is that desire to help people, which is fantastic. So
interesting what you're saying about this, the importance of individualization and the importance of knowing through evidence-based research what are the guiding treatments or approaches to how to work with individuals that are going through a certain illness, a certain disease, and how exercise can help them. So basically what you're saying is an internet post on social media is not the evidence that we're looking for, is it?
No, not ideal. No, and I mean that's a really important point. And something we look at and learn about in actually not just clinical exercise physiology, but all sports science, is understanding evidence and the different types of evidence, and being able to critically reflect on evidence. Just because something's written down doesn't necessarily make it true. So we want to be able to assess that information. Essentially check it, understand it, and evaluate it, and the it's when someone in a position of authority says something, it's really powerful. But just because that person holds a position of authority doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be true. So, it's understanding all those different types of information, and we live in a period of almost like data overload. We get so much presented to us in all sorts of formats and delivery models and from different areas. It can be really challenging to understand that. So having a strong understanding of research, of being able to critically evaluate research, and we apply that critical evaluation to research itself. Just because an article is published doesn't mean that we accept it. We still critically reflect on that, and I think that's probably one of my favorite things with research, with teaching, is going through and developing that critical thought, critical reflection, critical evaluation of things, because it's so important.
I agree because it's so easy just to fit it to the mold, and it's so easy to pick up something, whether it's a diet, whether it's a exercise regime, and just apply it because I picked it up from here, I can do it, I can deliver it. But the learning and applying research, which is one of the topics that we're touching on today, is that the use of applied research is so important, so we can actually do what's best for our people, for our communities, and the individuals that we have in front of us. And it's funny, we weren't going to take the conversation in this direction, but especially in the times that we're in with COVID. And so much being said, this is where that critical analysis that you're talking about allows us to understand better which is the way forward with regards to vaccinations or non-vaccinations, and the way forward to the treatment. I don't want to dwell on the vaccination discussion, but I want to dwell on respiratory illnesses. And because I know that from the clinical exercise physiology space, there's a lot of work that happens with patients that are recovering from serious or chronic respiratory illnesses. Can you walk us through that a little bit as an example?
Yeah. So there's a lot of research around various sort of respiratory illnesses and conditions. In terms of exercise, so we're guided by position stands and essentially like gold standard guidelines. So when we get someone, and it's really, this is the same, so regardless whether it's to do with some form of pulmonary disease, whether it's a heart disease, anything like that, there's a gold standard of almost like tools, right, that we can follow, a process. So we go through an assessment, and the assessments that we do are based on evidence, so that we know what we're going to be assessing is going to be effective, and the best way of assessing and looking at what we're trying to understand with that individual. Because that's always the first step that we start, is just trying to understand almost like the baseline position of the individual. In that, we'll also talk to them, try and understand, exactly what their goals are, their history, because that's really important as well. And then using that information, we can then individualize the exercise. And again, that exercise, there's guidelines and process that is there that we can follow. And that process, that guidance is based on evidence. The nice thing with that process, with that evidence, is it evolves with the evidence as we collect it. Right. So as our understanding grows, because in science we're learning all the time. Things that we know now, we've built upon, and things that we might know in the future is going to be built on research, and that it's really exciting to look into the future and see like some of that the innovation and stuff that's coming. But yeah, so that process that exists, and why we follow that is we know that from the evidence, from the research, there's these X or Y type of benefits that'll come from doing this type of program or this type of exercise. We know that if we follow this, there's very, very unlikely to have any adverse events from performing this type of exercise with this type of condition. So it's that a lot of times we balancing benefit and risk, there's that process. And of course, the other thing we do is we take a multidisciplinary approach. So what that means is a clinical exercise physiologist works with other medical professionals, because we're not a standalone. It's we work with the specialists, the physios, the nurses, the OTs, all those health professionals. We work together as a team, and when we do that, it's you get really, really effective, beneficial outcomes for the individual.
That's pretty cool, because if people that are in the exercise industry, the typical PAR-Q form that you get your clients to sign, so basically that they declare that they're healthy enough to take up exercise, like at your local gym. The clinical exercise physiologist take it up 3 or 4 levels up in regards to what kind of background information and continuous assessment is being done. Would you call them patients or clients in the clinical exercise space?
Oftentimes it depends just where they sitting in terms of the process. So with some conditions, you might have CEPs working within the hospital, within a hospital setting, in which case you'd probably refer to them as patients. Once they've been cleared to go into the sort of general population, if you will, then we'd probably refer to them as clients because it's kind of private setting. Yeah.
Perfect. Let me take you in a slightly different direction at the moment, Graeme. That applied research, because I mean, you were talking about that whole background in the CEP space, the clinical exercise physiology space, and the importance of looking at the research and applying it. But now, from your role as a senior lecturer and your role in sport and developing these future professionals in sport, which might be going into coaching, which might be going into strength and conditioning, which might be going into the CEP space, which might be going into teaching. How do you take that applied research mentality, that critical analysis mentality, to their learning? And what importance does that have for you?
Well, to me, it's really important because it's to me it's the foundation of what our industry is built on. If you have say an athlete and they want to know how to improve their jump height, how do you know what's effective? Well, you look at the research and see, okay, so this is the best way of doing it. Or you think for some of those elite athletes that the highest paid athletes, the likes of football, basketball, some of those, you don't want those. You want those athletes performing at their best, and you definitely don't want them sitting on the bench. So, when if you're the trainer, you want to make sure that what you're doing is going to be effective, and is going to be as safe and risk-free from injury as possible. So, the understanding the research is key, because like I said, it's what I think we base our decision-making process on. In terms of the learning, it's integrated in pretty much everything we do. With the lectures, what we present is based on the evidence. It's not our opinion. It can't be. We are a sports science, so we need to follow that evidence-based process. So everything we present in the lectures and the labs is evidence-based. Even to the tools that we utilize, the equipment, particularly the testing equipment, we need to understand its reliability, its validity. Essentially, like how precise is it? Is it actually measuring what we think it's measuring? Can it give that same measure, every time we take that measure? Because if it isn't, then we can't really use it, because if it's just giving us any old number, then how we can't trust that number. And again, if you think of it in terms of like anything really, whether it's your elite athlete or your recreational athlete, someone that wants to compete in 10K run, you want to know what your time is. So if you've got a chance to use a stopwatch, or a chance to use some type of laser light recording system.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm going to choose the laser, right? We know it's way more accurate than someone there sitting with the stopwatch. So, how we know that that equipment is accurate is actually testing what we think it's testing is by assessing it. We go and research its reliability. We'll go and research its validity, so that when strength and conditioners, when sports scientists, exercise physiologists, CEPs, PTs, the whole spectrum of our industry, when they are utilizing that kind of testing equipment, they can do so knowing that yes, this is a reliable piece of equipment, and the data I'm getting from it is going to be good. So that that is research being applied and being utilized to inform our practice and to drive our practice. There's research is also used to innovate, and there's a lot of innovation going on in that sports tech industry. Developing novel ways of testing new testing bits of equipment. So research is not only in terms of being utilized in terms of teaching and what we currently do now, but it's also really influential in driving innovation, in driving some forward thinking. Research essentially is curiosity, so you get to explore something that's really cool, that's really exciting. You have this idea and you say, cool, all right, let's go and explore this and try and find out something new. Or you've got this piece of equipment and you think, this is fantastic. I think it's amazing, but we might need to test and make sure that it is actually amazing. And so, there's that aspect as well. And that's fed into learning. For our students that find this area exciting, you've got that space into post-grad study, because a lot of that innovative research is done at in masters and PhD stuff. Of course, we also do it within a degree space, more so at a year 3 level. Where students are allowed to, if they come up with a novel idea, they can go through and sort of investigate that through a project space. That innovation happens through degree all the way through to PhD. It's a really, really exciting kind of space. If you like innovation, if you like the kind of forward thinking and really trying to push the envelope, so to speak, it's a really cool and exciting space.
It's definitely that research and having that applied research or just getting presented what's there so you can investigate and be curious about it actually grows student creativity, grows critical thinking, grows critical analysis of young developing sports professionals, which is what we have the chance to encounter and the chance to work and develop. I see that growth, and it gets me excited that I work with guys like yourself that are actually also pushing those barriers and boundaries, so our students can get really excited in regards to what's new, what else is out there. And we've had the experience over the years with the AFL coming over, and they bring the same lights that they use across the different states of Australia to use in New Zealand to test the New Zealand athletes, because that validity that you were talking about. So we have that experience of what Jared does with the basketball and how we perform the same test across to the different cohorts of New Zealand basketball players, so we can have that accurate assessment and validity of those results, but also giving students that firsthand experience of understanding what it's used for, how to get that validity. What else can you think of how you can use this? And that's really important. So there's definitely a value for industry. I see it. I see there's a definite value there for industry to connect with academia and connect with this critical search for knowledge and new ways of doing it. This building critical analysis and building this capability is not necessarily reflected in immediate incomes, but it does build individuals. And we've had this discussion many times, Graeme. How do we connect all these parties together?
Yeah, it's I think that's the age-old question with science and research, right? Is funding. It's I think the that innovative aspect of research is I think really key for industry. Driving and testing what can be done, trying new things, trying new equipment, developing new equipment, new ideas. There's a lot of development, of course, going on at the minute with the likes of AI, machine learning.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. So that's probably a big innovative space where industry and research is coming together. There's so much opportunity, so much innovation and exploration is from just from a science perspective. It's again like that curiosity I said just before. It's the chance to explore some new ideas, and I think much like pretty much every other area, just in general, the AI, machine learning, all that kind of stuff is having a big impact, and it's only growing. So I think that's going to be a big opportunity to connect industry and research. Yeah.
I was actually gonna ask you about that because you know how I love baseball, among the many sports that I do love and get involved in, and baseball. Many of you have watched the movie Moneyball, and that's where it blew up that curiosity about how baseball connects with artificial intelligence and analytics. This year, the Atlanta Braves, which are going to start playing the World Series next week, their coach, he doesn't use analytics. He's still old school, and he's been able to get the Atlanta Braves after 22, 23 years, I believe, to their first World Series. But you see that there's definitely a growing move into using analytics in the AFL. Basically, their back office during games in terms of analysts is huge. We see more and more analysts coming in and being involved in the different sports. How do you feel we're doing here in New Zealand at the moment with the incorporation of analytics and AI? And do you think there is a definite space of growth, or do you think there's barriers up there in terms of actually using it in our traditional spaces?
There's probably like all things, a bit of both, right? So there's definitely opportunity, and there's a lot of projects up and running, looking at some novel ideas, testing things out. It also represents a big change, and with any change, there's always an aspect of hesitancy, of sometimes it's just time. Just time to understand the technology, time to understand where it might fit. And sometimes it's perceived as a barrier, but that's about education and learning. So it's I don't necessarily see it as a full barrier. It's just something to explore and educate and understand. I think we're developing and growing, and I imagine that growth is going to become exponential. It's developing little by little, and then eventually it's just going to catch on fire, if it hasn't already, really. It's such an exciting area, that whole area, and also with you touched on like Moneyball and data and all that kind of stuff. We collect so much data. It can sometimes be actually really hard to process and understand it.
Right.
So what's growing in importance is being able to how to understand that data, how to present it, Sometimes it's even how to ask the right questions. Is you get this big data set, but it's yeah. How do we? What are the right questions to ask? How
Or,
do
or,
we
or you,
look through?
or how do you scaffold that data gathering so you can actually use it in the right times and moments, which is so crucial.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So and that's you can see where something like AI is going to be quite influential and helpful in that space. Yeah.
So sports education, which is what we're in, and we're quite keen on, and the benefits of sports education in terms of that critical thinking, so we can incorporate that knowledge into our industry. And I ask you this because and we share this common interest in innovation and entrepreneurship in our industry, in our space. Where do you see things going, especially in this kind of COVID environment?
Well, you mentioned the key word there, which is entrepreneurship. I think it's with change comes opportunity, and like you mentioned, COVID is a huge change. It's changed behavior. It's changed how people interact with exercise, with physical activity, with nutrition, all that kind of stuff. So there's been big change, and so there's big opportunity. So being entrepreneurial, so looking at that opportunity, looking at those spaces critically, reflecting on little opportunities, and sometimes those opportunities, it doesn't necessarily mean a new thing. We've spoken a lot about tools and stuff. Sometimes it can just be doing something with a different business model. That innovation could be in that space. It doesn't have to be a new thing. And there's again, research. We've spoken about sports science research, but there's a lot of research and innovation going in that sports management space, because that area is huge, and that's an area that's probably been presented with one of the biggest challenges with sport is administrating and navigating this COVID space, and looking forward. What is that? What is the business model going to look like? How do we approach even things like sponsors and all those different areas that COVID sort of has affected, all the roll-on effect from COVID. So I'm a big fan of entrepreneurship. I think that's going to be driving a lot of future innovation. Be it business models or be it technology. So again, a really exciting space.
And I agree with you. If you have a better knowledge of the background of the industry that you want to innovate in, you have a better chance of also being more entrepreneurial, more groundbreaking in your entrepreneurial adventure, with the innovation that you're trying to present to the industry. So I definitely see that value. I always go back to remember a few years back when I visited that innovation center at the Sunshine Coast University, and they were telling me that they had that view of the kind of technology that they were going to be developing out of there, because of how much technology and sports science tech comes out of Australasia, of course. And they never knew that 2-3 years down the line, the majority of their innovation was coming around nutritional products, and they were going like, well, we were thinking technology, and most of the innovation that's coming out of our hub is actually of nutritional products. But that's how vast our sports industry is, and how we normally use that big poster and circle where we show all the different directions where a sports career can go. But you're a clear example. The CEP space, the training space, the coaching space. That we've talked about nutrition. We've talked about technology. We've talked about entrepreneurship. With entrepreneurship comes the finances, comes the legal stuff, comes the protections and licenses. It's so vast that we need critical thinkers. And I don't know if you agree with me, but those critical thinkers is what we need to develop in that next generation of sports professionals.
Yeah, definitely, and because there's also that that aspect of entrepreneurship, right? So that innovation doesn't just have to be the individual trying something new. It can be within an organization driving new change, driving ideas. So that critical thinking, that critical understanding is relevant, across industry. And I see that some of my favorite papers with the year 3 research paper, and a paper that we've worked on, the directed study paper.
That's right.
Seeing the students come up with some really cool ideas is really exciting, and like innovative approaches to thinking about problems, and it's that area where you have that freedom to kind of explore an idea, to go through and critically analyze something, and develop those kind of skills. It's really cool.
It is. It absolutely is. And because many people look at sport, play games, right? Lift some weights, and throw around some tin, and then go play a game with a ball and shoot some hoops. But the skills in the human development that sport provides, is tremendous. And I think the invitation to our listeners is, go back to when you were children, when you were young children. You wanted to play games, you wanted to play sports. Why? Because it was fun, and because it just made you feel good. But through feeling good and by having fun, you were just mentally predisposed to learning and just absorbing experiences and being critical of, if you're playing cricket, of actually understanding what ball to hit and what ball not to hit. And that was critical thinking, that was decision making. The thing is, when you get now to tertiary and you get to work with guys like Graeme, now we actually throw you really fast, curvy bowls down the wicket, and you got to learn how to really quickly discern and actually understand how you're going to face them, and what kind of decisions you can make, and how it can benefit either your team, your athletes, or your wider community moving forward. Just because sport is sport, I think we should not underestimate the huge potential of skill and human development that is achieved because it's that feel-good factor. I don't know if you agree with me 100% on that, Graeme.
Yeah, it's when you're engaging with something that you really enjoy, it makes it a lot easier to work through and tackle some issues and problems, and come up with solutions, and look at the evidence, and develop an argument. So I guess it fits with that thing, of being passionate about your area, and driving towards that opportunity that you might see, or that you want, that you're striving towards.
We're getting to the end of 2021. For us here in Auckland, it's wrapping up in a unexpected way. We never thought that we were going to be in lockdown for so long, but so it is, and we're making the most out of it. What are your plans for next year, Graeme? What are from that research point of view, from the developing our next generation of students? What do you see as the big goals for next year?
I think driving that innovative entrepreneurial spirit is going to be quite key. Being open to opportunities. Part of science, part of research is trying to look at things without bias. It's really important we try and free ourselves from bias. So so we're not locked into a certain way of thinking. That if we see something different, we don't shut it out just because it's different. If anything, we try and embrace it, and understand it. It's to be able to try new things, to fail, because it's okay to fail and learn from it. That's so much of the time we learn from our errors and we develop from that. So that I think that's going to be really important, that developing that open mindset, being open to opportunity, is going to be quite important, and especially if there's going to be a big uplift in terms of what the traditional path used to be. If there's big disruption through that, if you're expecting that path to be there, it's going to be quite hard. So if you're open to opportunity, instead of disruption being a barrier, it becomes an opportunity, and that a lot of that is a shift, or not necessarily a shift, but how you view things, how you approach things, and yeah, I think that's going to be key. I think we started off at the beginning where I was talking about my path. From fitness instructor, it was almost like a ladder. Who knows if that path is going to exist, or and I mean, in many ways, when I started, CEP didn't exist. Clinical exercise physiologist wasn't a thing. When we started, we opened our door, and everybody's first question was, "What's a clinical exercise physiologist?" Because nobody had ever heard about it before. So, I mean, even I guess in some ways, my path wasn't linear. I myself and my colleagues saw an opportunity, and it wasn't there wasn't even a door. We had to build the door to open it. That is going to become even, that type of thinking, that openness to opportunities is going to be really important in a sort of a disrupted future, if you will.
I'll probably back up what you're saying with probably the best thing that people can do at the moment is invest in themselves, invest in knowledge, and invest in developing their skills to grow their human potential in what's going to come in the next few years. Somebody was telling me we're going to have the roaring 20s. Probably will have the roaring 20s. So we got to be prepared, and we got to be skilled up for what's going to be the roaring 20s. Out of all this shift and change that we are already seeing around the world, even of how we deliver education, which is probably another topic that we'll probably sit down and have a real vast conversation on, because we have developed a few things together and talked about it vastly about this changing world of education. And I think definitely that's one of our next conversations to have on the Paddock. Graeme, thanks a lot for coming on this week. I think our students, our former students, and our listeners that are just getting to know us will really enjoy listening to how sport is and can be so strongly research driven, and the benefits and the connections that research can have to our sporting industry. So thanks so much for being on here. And personally, I'll probably be talking to you in a few hours or tomorrow. But thank you so much for being on the Paddock, Graeme.
Cool, my pleasure, and I look forward to seeing your 1920s haircut next time we meet.
Oh yeah, God, I think I need it. See you, Graeme. Thanks a lot, man.
Okay, thanks.